Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of the podcast. We've got a pretty fun one today. The NFL draft, of course, is in a little bit over a week. We are getting close. Along with that, the NBA playoffs are going to be starting up within the next few days. The MLB season is in full swing. So right now it is a pretty fun time in the sports calendar, and we've got a lot to go over. As always, I am joined by Nickinator. If you want to say hi to everybody.
Hello, hello.
And with that, we will quickly begin. Other than the NFL draft, there hasn't been a ton of super notable moves over the last few weeks. Obviously, free agency has died down and all the attention has gone on to the draft. But we have had one pretty big deal within the last week or two, that being Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans with some pick swaps in there, but most notably, the Bills getting Houston's second-round pick next year. And the common theme around this trade seems to be that the Texans made out really well. If Stefon Diggs plays to his ceiling, then I think that will be correct. Stefon Diggs, at his best, is one of the best receivers in the NFL. The problem is, he's showing signs of age. He's not getting younger. I believe he's either close to 30 or probably over 30 at this point. He's been in the league 8-9 years, so he probably is. And receiver is not a position that ages super gracefully. You've got your exceptions, such as Larry Fitzgerald and Jerry Rice historically, but not everybody is like those guys. Most receivers do not play well into their 30s, and I'm concerned for Stefon Diggs that he will join the trend of receivers who fall off once they make it into their 30s, as he already was showing towards the second half of last year when he probably was not the best receiver on a Bills receiving core that already was pretty bad. Along with that, Stefon Diggs is a head case. I don't love to throw the D word around, diva, because I think it's overused. But in the case of Stefon Diggs, the guy is a diva. There's a reason why the Bills traded him just after extending him, I'm pretty sure last offseason, taking on a ton of dead cap. And then the Texans come in and wipe his contract out, saying, you only have one more year left. You're going to become a free agent at the end of the season. You can cash out if you want, which should give him more incentive, which probably may help Stefon Diggs play better this year. But I feel like that's also pretty telling that the Texans are aware of the long-term concerns of keeping Diggs on the roster, whether that's in the case of a team-building perspective where he's going to cause problems, or his age. There's a ton of questions for me with Stefon Diggs, and because of that, I think this is a win for the Bills, getting rid of him now, getting some value, because I don't think his value will ever be higher.
I have been in the stance, along with you, that Stefon Diggs is taking that downward trend and is going to decline harsher than we might have thought. We saw it towards the end of last season for the Bills, where they went on that 6-game winning streak after the overtime loss to the Eagles, and they were able to go out and win the AFC East. And Stefon Diggs was non-existent over that 6-game stretch. I think he had like 140, maybe 170 yards and 0 touchdowns the entire 6-game stretch, which is terrible. Khalil Shakir, who was essentially the number 3 receiver last year, had half the amount of targets and more yards and more touchdowns during that stretch. And he's probably going to be the number 2 receiver, depending on how the draft goes for the Bills. And he's going to be fantastic. Khalil Shakir's a dog. And Stefon Diggs is a former All-Pro. He's top 10 or whatever. And he's playing worse than what is just a slot receiver. But I have been in the stance that I think Stefon Diggs still has some gas left in him. And I always thought there was one specific place that I think he would perform his best at, and that was in Houston. So I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to feel about it. I have to wait and see exactly how we're going to see Stefon Diggs play. But given that he's only on a 1-year deal, so that way he has incentive to play. And if he plays poorly, he's not going to get the money. And if he plays well, might get re-signed. But unlike the Bills, the Texans have a really good set of receivers besides from Stefon Diggs. They have Nico Collins. They'll be getting Tank Dell back. You have Dalton Schultz, who's not too bad at tight end. So if he ends up being a cancer, you could just cut him and just get rid of him at that point and don't worry about it. Unlike the Bills, who kind of needed him because Gabe Davis only gets 2, maybe 3 games over 100 yards a year, and Khalil Shakir, but that's it. And they kind of needed Stefon Diggs to be there, but he didn't form. And with him being the egotistical guy that he is, that he's getting pissed after week 1, that the conversation that was reported between him and Josh Allen was just horrible, and hearing that comes out kind of shows that he is kind of a diva. That's exactly what he is. And I like the idea from both sides. I like that the Bills are not afraid to move on and trust these younger guys like Khalil Shakir. They signed Curtis Samuel, who's not Stephon Diggs good, but he's still a guy, and they know their receiving class is really good this year. So they're probably going to go out and draft a receiver in the first round, maybe trade down a big, go early in the second, whatever they want to do. And we'll see where they go from there. But I do like this for the Texans a lot, because I think Stephon Diggs is going to perform really well in this Houston offense.
So now that kind of poses the question of, could we see some other big-time players on the move? Compared to the MLB and the NBA, we don't see as many big-time player trades in the NFL, but it has become more common over the last 5 years, and there are a couple of names to watch out for. I think the name that's been in the most trade rumors over the last month or so is Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco. He wants a new contract. It seems unclear if San Francisco's going to give him the money, and with Devontae Smith's new deal, all of these other receivers' deals have probably moved up a little bit. I think it's pretty easy for San Francisco. I think you pay the man his money. He's one of the best receivers in the NFL, and I think ultimately that's what they will do. If they do trade Ayuk, I think they'd be able to get a really nice package in return, probably at least a first-round pick and then some, because he is that caliber of player. And then the other name we have written down on the script is Patrick Surtain in Denver. This is one that I really can't see happening. Surtain is one of the best young defensive players in the NFL. The only way I think the Broncos trade him is that they have to in order to move up for a quarterback. I've been in the stance for the last 2 months that they're going to stick at 12 and draft Bo Nix. I think that's what they're going to do. But if they want to move up to, say, like pick 4 or something, that could be in play as well for probably the 4th quarterback in this class. Theoretically, let's say that's J.J. McCarthy, who they have been linked to. As we saw last year with the Panthers moving up from 9 to 1, they had to trade DJ Moore in order to get the 1st overall pick, and DJ Moore's not a guy they wanted to trade. But they recognized it's worth it to go and get their QB. That could be the case here with Surtain. Now, the circumstances are slightly different because Surtain's younger than DJ Moore. He's better than DJ Moore. And it's easier to move up from 12 to 4 than it is from 9 to 1. So if Surtain is in this trade, I don't think it would be too much more than Surtain and the 12th pick, if that, which already feels like a steal of a trade for Arizona. They could theoretically move up to like pick 8 and still get one of the best receivers in the class while adding Patrick Surtain, which would be nuts. So I think that's the only way he would be moved. So if Patrick Surtain is on a team other than Denver next year, I would bet that team would be Arizona, but I can't see that happening. He's going to be a Bronco for a long time, as he should be. And then I don't think there's any other clear, somewhat big-time players who are going to be on the move. So now that I say that, that means we're going to have some wild draft day trade, and there's going to be a ton of fireworks.
There's going to be I feel like there's going to be someone that's going to get traded on draft night that we're kind of not ready for. 2 years ago, we saw A.J. Brown get dealt at the deadline. Not the deadline, during draft. That was kind of out of the blue. I don't think there was another big one last year or even in 2022, now that I think about it. But we know T. Higgins is on the franchise tag, so he could get traded. He spoke, I think, the other day at his camp that he plans to stay in Cincy and plans to sign an extension, but you never know. Ayuk, you mentioned another guy who is essentially on the tag, got one more year on his deal left, so he could be out the door. But we saw the same team deal with Debo. I expect Ayuk to get traded. You mentioned PS2. I have seen plenty of reports be saying that if the Broncos want to move up, they are desperate for a QB, namely J.J. McCarthy. But if they do move up, they would be willing to trade PS2, depending on where they go. I doubt that happens. I don't think they would willingly go out and trade their best player. Another guy on their team that I could see traded is Courtland Sutton. They already traded Jerry Jeudy. They're desperate enough to go get a QB, and Courtland Sutton's been in trade rumors for probably over a year now at this point. So I could see it happening. I know you would love to see him in Detroit, but if they use him to move up, I wouldn't mind seeing them go up to 4. Arizona gets Courtland Sutton, and even maybe draft another receiver later. You have Courtland Sutton, you have, I don't know, Rumor Doomsday or something, I don't know. But there's definitely a good few players I think we could see get traded. We've seen Charles Connor-Johnson got traded for the Saints to the Eagles right before training camp started. So we can see maybe say a Budda Baker get traded. That's just off the top of my head. There's definitely some older players on these more rebuilding teams that we could see get traded just because, I don't know, contract disputes. Maybe they just don't want to play for that team anymore. Maybe they want to get a ring. Who knows? But realistically, I don't think we see anything as big as Stephon Diggs.
Okay, so with that, we will move to our NFL draft talk. We only have one more position group to go through. That is the defensive backs, which we have obviously saved for today. This defensive back class is certainly a good one, and that starts at the cornerback position, where we could have 4 or 5 guys go in the first round. And I think the conception around this corner class is it's not overly deep of a group, which I kind of disagree with, but if that's what NFL teams think, then that means we could see guys go off the board earlier than expected. I think the race for CB1 comes down to 2 guys, and that's Quinion Mitchell from Toledo and Terrion Arnold from Alabama. With Mitchell, you're getting someone who's been rock solid in coverage over the last few years, really good at the Senior Bowl, really good at the Combine. Obviously, played for a small school in Toledo, but he checks off all the boxes, and if I had to bet on who the first corner off the board would be, I think I would pick him. Then we've got Terrion Arnold out of the University of Alabama. He's a ball hawk who really improved over this last season. 5 interceptions, got better in coverage. I think he's going to be a lock for the top 20 as well. And I think after Mitchell and Arnold, it gets a little bit weird. There are a few guys who are consensus first rounders, but I don't think any of them are locks. We'll start with Cooper DeJean, who I think has the best chance of going in the first round other than Mitchell and Arnold. DeJean is versatile. You can put him inside. You can put him outside. You can put him at safety. He's been a really good player for Iowa for a number of years. I'm not as convinced he's going to go in the first round as everybody seems to think, but I do think he belongs in round 1, and I could see him being one of the final picks of the round. Then we've got Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama. Very technically sound player. He's not an elite athlete. He had the foot issue, which seems to be cleared up now. He's another guy who I think belongs in round 1, but I'm not entirely convinced it's going to happen. Nonetheless, I think he's a really good player who's going to be able to contribute at a high level early on. Nate Wiggins, I think, rounds out this current tier of guys. And my hot take is that Nate Wiggins does not go in the first round. He's big, he's got long arms, he's very talented, very athletic, but there are some questions with him. He's skinny, durability concerns, very inconsistent in run defense, and it's not so much a lack of effort from him, but he's just not that good in that area of his game. I don't think he would fall too far into the second round. I think he's a top 45 lock, but I'm not convinced he goes in round 1, and I think there are a handful of players who could go earlier who people don't expect. There's a group of 3 who are currently projected as late second, early third round guys, all 3 of whom I think could slip into the first round over some of these other guys like Wiggins and Kool-Aid. We'll start with Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky. I think he's a really talented player. He's another guy who I think has inside-outside versatility, and I think teams really seem to like his skill set. Max Melton from Rutgers has had his stock go way up. He tested really well at the Combine. He's been really solid in coverage over his past couple of seasons and has improved over the last couple of years. And then Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. He has all the physical tools. 6'3", 200 pounds. Really good season in coverage. He finally broke out this season after being a high-level SEC transfer. And I think with his size and production this year, he could sneak into the first round. We then get to that next tier of guys who I think are probably second-round locks. Mike Sainristil from Michigan is a really good player, but he's undersized. That's the question with him. Nonetheless, I think he's a fantastic corner. DJ Tampa from Iowa State's pretty solid. I think he goes later than expected, but I think he could be pretty good. Ennis Rakestraw and Kamari Lassiter, 2 other SEC guys, I put them kind of in the same boat because they're good players, but there are some athletic questions. I think Lassiter is the better of the 2, and I think he is the better athlete. He did not run a good time at all at his pro day. It was lower than 4.6, and pro day times can be inflated, so that's a concern in itself. Nonetheless, I think Lassiter doesn't necessarily need his elite speed to be a good player. And I'm a little bit more concerned about the physical limitations with Ennis Rakestraw, who did not end up with a good RAS score. He's not some incredible height, weight, speed guy. He's not some incredible versatile player in terms of he can play outside, he can play in the slot, but he is a good cover player, and he probably should still end up in the top 75 picks, but I'm not convinced he's going to go as early as people think. And then in terms of sleepers, Renardo Green from Florida State's a guy I've liked a bit, has experience at corner and safety. Kalen Carson from Wake Forest is pretty good. He's been a really solid cover player over the last 3 years. He could be a solid late top 100 pick. Chris Abrams-Drain from Missouri, the other Missouri corner, coming off a really good season after he was pretty inconsistent last year. I think he could be a guy who ends up being a steal. DJ James from Auburn, he's been really solid over the last couple of years, an Oregon transfer, high-level recruit, kind of put it together with the Tigers, although he's really skinny himself, 165 pounds. I like Cam Hart out of Notre Dame quite a bit. He had a really good season. Strong Senior Bowl, 6'2", 210, big guy. And then my biggest sleeper at corner is Decamerion Richardson out of Mississippi State. I feel like he has not been talked about really at all, and I don't get it in the slightest. I think he's a really solid player who's improved every year in coverage, really good athlete, really good size, and I think if once you're outside the top 75 picks at corner, your best bet is to take swings on guys who are big and athletic, and Decamerion Richardson is that. I don't think he should fall out of the top 100 picks. I don't think he will fall out of the top 100, but nobody's really talking about him, and I think he deserves more love.
Yeah, for this corner class specifically, we're looking at that big top 5 with DeJean, Mitchell, Arnold, Wiggins, and Kool-Aid. And that's kind of the group that everyone's been talking about. And I definitely am on the side that all 5 of these guys are first-round caliber players. Basically, every day I change the order I had these guys in. I've been a Nate Wiggins guy for a while. I think he's going to be fantastic. He needs a little bit of help to kind of get the weight up, gain some muscle a little bit. But I think he has all the tools necessary to become an elite corner in the NFL. But truthfully, I do think Quinyon Mitchell is probably going to be the best corner out of the entire class. He is phenomenal. The only issue that I feel like I have with him is he played at Toledo, so he didn't play against all that crazy of competition. But realistically, if he can guard a guy, he can guard a lot of other guys, and I think he's going to be phenomenal. I haven't always been like the biggest Terrion Arnold guy, but I think he's still going to be really good. DeJean reminds me a lot about like Brian Branch. He can play the slot corner, outside corner. He can play safety, kind of that like do-it-all kind of guy, or like it's C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I think he's going to be phenomenal. You did mention that he might fall a bit. I could definitely see that with people thinking, oh, what position is he going to play in the NFL? Is he a safety? Is he a corner? What's he going to do? You don't know. If people view him more as a safety, he's probably going to fall a little bit because safeties always fall in the draft. And Kool-Aid has been a guy that I've been backing on for a while. I think he's going to be really good, and I think people kind of slept on him for a little bit. He's been looked at for a while as a future top 5 pick, and now that it's time for him to get drafted, he's not up there. You have guys like Mitchell and Arnold and Wiggins in the class, where he's probably going to go late first round, early second round. But I think he's going to be a phenomenal pick by whoever gets him. In that second group, you mentioned guys like Andrew Phillips, you mentioned Kamari Lassiter. I have been a big TJ Tampa guy for a good while. I love what this guy has on film. A little taller than your average corner, 6'2", a little over 200. I think he has the size, he has the athleticism, he's got the tools. If he can kind of fix up his footwork a little bit, I think he'd be a fantastic outside corner, and he can almost always guard the 1 or 2 receiver. It will be fantastic at that job. If a team will go get him in the early second round, I will not bat an eye if that happens. Rakestraw is a guy who I've liked for a while. His pro day kind of disappointed seeing how low his athleticism was, and we'll see what he kind of does. But I think he has a lot of tools that will be really good for when he gets to the league, but we'll see if the lack of athleticism kind of deters him from being the type of player that I have always thought he could be. Lassiter's kind of in that group as well. I've always been a Rakestraw guy, but I do think Lassiter's also really good. You mentioned Max Melton from Rutgers. He's going to be rising up the boards, probably going to go someday on day 2. I think he's got a lot of potential. You mentioned Kyrie Jackson. I like him a lot. You mentioned Renardo Green. I want to mention his Florida State teammate, Jarian Jones. He was fantastic last year for Florida State. I think he still has a little bit of room to grow, kind of develop his skills and whatnot. But I think he could be a really, really talented corner in the NFL. And Rakestraw's teammate, Chris Abrams-Drain, I think he's got some tools that we could see kind of go in the NFL and kind of show that he can play at the higher level. You know, he's got the athleticism that you don't see from Rakestraw. He's a little shorter. He's under 6 foot, a little under 180. But I do think he's got the tools to kind of make up for that, especially with his speed. And the only other guy I want to mention is, I think you might have mentioned him, Mississippi State Cameron Richardson. I think he's going to be phenomenal in this draft. He's going to be a really good late round scoop up. And whoever gets up, they're going to get a great corner, great size, and just they're going to be getting phenomenal. I think that's who you mentioned. I don't think anyone's really talked about him. I do really like what he's going to be able to bring to the NFL. And I don't know who's going to get him, but whoever gets him in like the 4th, 5th round, they're going to get a steal of a player.
The safety class is certainly not as good, especially if you consider Cooper DeJean a corner. I'm not entirely sure who my safety 1 is going to be, but a guy who's been getting a lot of buzz, who I've been on the bandwagon for, is Tyke Smith out of Georgia. He primarily plays slot corner, but I think he can play safety at the next level as well. He's coming off a really good season with the Bulldogs this past year. Good athlete. Obviously, he's versatile. A little bit undersized, though, at 5'10", 205. But I think he'll be able to play safety at a high level despite not really playing there a ton this year. And that's partly because Georgia had other really good players in the back end. Malachi Starks is a guy who could be a top 15 pick next year. And then Javon Bullard is another guy who's going to be drafted pretty early this year. Really, really good cover player over the last 2 years. Somebody who probably ends up in the top 100 picks at minimum. And he's also got a lot of experience in the slot as well. Tyler Nubin from Minnesota is probably the top projected safety as of now. Nubin's a really, really good player who's coming off a great season with the Golden Gophers. He did not test overly well athletically, though, so there are some concerns in that department, but he's a very traditional back-end safety who can be your center fielder. I do think he's going to have enough range to be a good cover player. If you're looking for a more versatile safety who can play all over the field, there are a few players who fit that bill as well. Jaden Hicks from Washington State's a guy who primarily lines up in the box. He's a talented player. Kalen Bullock from USC, former high recruit. He plays all over the field, whether you want him at slot corner, do you want him at box linebacker, you want him back deep as a center field safety. He did it all last year with the Trojans. And then you've got Dadrian, Jack Rabbit, Taylor Demerson out of Texas Tech, who also has a lot of experience at all those spots. I think he's going to be one of the first 3 safeties off the board. I think he's really, really good. The Utah duo is a fun group as well. Cole Bishop is a guy who probably goes earlier than expected. He's coming off a strong season. And then Sione Vaki is a really fun player. He was a two-way guy in college. He played a lot of running back. Really, really impressive athlete. He's probably going to stick at safety at the next level, but he's a really fun player who is also quite versatile. A little bit inconsistent this past season, though, but I think the athletic upside is really there. And then I think the Miami duo is pretty interesting. We'll start with Cam Kitchens, who going into the year looked like a first rounder. He had a great sophomore season, but he wasn't as good this year. He didn't test super well, so there are some concerns there, but we have seen the high level of play. And then James Williams is an interesting guy to me because he was once a 5-star recruit, super hyped out of high school, really versatile player, really good athlete, and I don't think he's necessarily been a bad player at Miami. He didn't necessarily live up to the hype, but for a guy who's projected to go on day 3, I think he's an intriguing upside swing. If you can get him on a team who knows how they're going to use him at 6'5", 215, there's a lot of spots he can play. I think he's worth the swing on upside. I think there are some character concerns with him that occurred earlier in his college career. So if those are behind him and he gets into a place that can develop him really well, I think he's a guy who can still reach his ceiling, even though that wasn't necessarily shown during his time with the Canes.
Yeah, the safety class, I feel, isn't It's not nearly as top-heavy as the corner class is going to be, but I do think there's going to be a lot of guys we're going to see go day 2 and especially on day 3. They're going to make big impacts. Tyler Nubin from Minnesota is definitely going to be my number 1 safety. I've been a Nubin fan for a while. He didn't test all that well during the offseason, but I think he'll be just fine. I think he's going to come in, probably be the first safety off the board. I think he's going to be phenomenal. And you mentioned Javon Bullard. I've been riding this train for a while. I think he's going to be a future stud. He's a little undersized, under 6 foot, but he's got the strength, he's got the speed, he's got a lot to bring in and be a very good safety. He can do a lot of things, just like Caleb Bullock, another guy that I have been all in on for a while. Like you mentioned, he can do everything in the box, center field. He can basically almost play outside corner at this point. I think he's going to be phenomenal getting into the league. And you start getting into those day 3 guys. You mentioned Cam Kitchens, who at one point was a potential first rounder. It's kind of fallen down, probably going to go somewhere in day 3. I think he still has some tools that are going to be able to be used in the NFL. You mentioned the Utah guys, Vaki and Bishop. I think both of them are going to be fantastic. They're going to have a lot of athleticism going in. Ketan Oladapo from Oregon State. He has a lot of tools, 6'1", 215. I really like this guy coming out. I think he's going to be phenomenal. I think it might take him a year or 2 to kind of get into the role where he's going to be on the field more often. But I think as a rookie, he's going to play a lot of special teams. He's going to get the impact of being in the NFL. And then as soon as he's going to be a starter in the NFL, I think he's going to be fantastic. And my biggest sleeper that I have been riding for a while, Beau Brade out of Maryland. He reminds me a lot of my boy Reed Blankenship on Philly. I think Brade is going to be essentially that role where he's going to be a phenomenal run defending safety. He's going to come in from out of nowhere and just stop the run immediately, stop the line of scrimmage, make sure they don't get more than 2 yards a gain. Or if he's the last man to beat, he will make sure that he will not get beat. He has his flaws. There's a reason why he's drafted in the third or fourth round. But I think if he gets drafted by the right team, I think Beau Brade is a future star in this league.
Okay, so with that, we will shift our attention to the end of the NBA regular season. We'll go over our award thoughts and our official playoff predictions. So the NBA regular season is now in the books. The play-in tournament will be going on this week, and the playoffs will start over the weekend. So we'll start with our award predictions, or I guess where we would place our votes if we had votes. So I'll start with my MVP pick. I think this is actually a really tough choice. I feel like normally by the end of the year, we kind of get a gauge on who the clear choice is. For me, not really. Luka Doncic is making this really tough for me. I'm going to lean Nikola Jokic, though. I think he's been the most valuable player in the association this year. But Luka Doncic is not too far behind. He would be my second place vote. And then I would put Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at third. I think those are the clear top 3 in some order. And then at 4, 5, 6, some combination of probably Giannis, Tatum, and maybe Jalen Brunson from there. The Rookie of the Year is going to be Victor Wembanyama. Not really a debate here. Chet Holmgren was awesome. He would win Rookie of the Year more seasons than not. But unfortunately for him, he is the best prospect over the last 20 years who had probably the best rookie season over at least the last 20 years, probably longer. As for the Sixth Man of the Year, it's probably going to be Malik Monk, who, don't get me wrong, had a strong season, but I'm a little bit more impressed by Naz Reid from Minnesota, who's able to provide them really good offensive ability as a big. His efficiency was quite a bit better than Malik Monk's. Most notably, his three-point percentage, I think, was 6 points higher, and he was good enough defensively behind Gobert and Cat. He can play with both of those guys in the front court, which I think his versatility makes him such an asset, and that's why I would probably vote for him over Monk. Speaking of Minnesota, they'll get my Defensive Player of the Year vote with Rudy Gobert. The Rudy Gobert discourse over his career, I feel like, has been, for the most part, very unfair. I think there's going to be some people arguing that it should be Victor Wembanyama, and while he was fantastic, the Defensive Player of the Year should be a guy who obviously is individually a great defender, but really elevates the team's defense, and that's been Rudy Gobert for the longest time. He's going to win Defensive Player of the Year, number 4 for him. As for Most Improved, it's probably going to be Tyrese Maxey. I don't have a major issue with this. Maxey went from a good player to a fringe All-NBA guy. But for me, I like to pick the guy who was literally the most improved player. Coby White from the Bulls went from a bad player to a good player. We expected Tyrese Maxey to take a leap up. Maybe not this high, but we didn't expect this out of Coby White. So for that, he's going to be my most improved pick. And then Coach of the Year, we're going with Mark DeAginault from Oklahoma City. They got the #1 seed. Those young guys all really progressed, and for that, I think he should be the Coach of the Year.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of similarities here. I've been banking on the Luka train for MVP for a long couple months now, probably since like January, February. I've been banking on it, that if the Mavs get a top 6 seed, it should be Luka. And what do you know? They got the 5th seed, and I'm all in the train of Luka getting his first MVP. If anyone were to get it that's not Luka, it would definitely be Jokic, and I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. It's Jokic, I get it. But without Luka on this team, the Mavs probably don't make the playoffs, maybe not even make the play-in with how competitive the West is. So I think it should 1,000% be Luka. For Rookie of the Year, I'm going Wemby. It's the obvious choice here. And I'm riding on Wemby for Defensive Player of the Year. When Wemby is not on the court, the Spurs are like a bottom 3, bottom 5 defensive team. With Wemby on the court, they are a top 5 defensive team. That is, it's around those numbers, but he improves their defense 15-fold. I don't even know what it is. But he is so ridiculous, and shout out to Rudy Gobert. He's ridiculous, amazing defender. And I have been saying it should be Rudy for a while. But with how much of an impact that Wemby is bringing to that Spurs defense, I think he needs to be put in this conversation, and I'm gonna give it to Wemby. For 6th Man of the Year, I'm rolling with Malik Monk. It's kind of the obvious choice, but I think he's just been really good coming off the bench. For most improved, I think I said this a good couple months ago towards the All-Star break, but I'm going with Coby White. He went from being a bench player averaging less than 10 points a game to a starter averaging, 19 points a game, nearly 20 points a game. Coby White has been kind of ridiculous. And Coach of the Year, I'm going Jamal Mosley, the coach of the Orlando Magic. They went from a rebuilding team to a top 4 seed. I think they're the 4 seed. So, yeah, they kind of overperformed a little bit, and they're pretty good.
Now it's time to go through our playoff brackets, and I will kick things off. In the play-in tournament, I actually had a hard time with these. With the Western Conference, I'm going with the Lakers over the Pelicans. I think they match up with them a little bit better. Now, there are some people saying that the Lakers should throw this game to avoid the Nuggets in the first round. I think Denver is a significantly worse matchup for them than Oklahoma City. But I think that would also be pretty stupid for them to do, and I think they will win this game. And then in the other game, I went back and forth between Golden State and Sacramento, but ultimately, I'm going to lean with the Warriors just because they've been there, they've done that. They have Stephen Curry, who's going to be the best player on the floor. I think this game could go either way, though. The last 3 matchups between these two teams this year were all decided by exactly 1 point. And the playoff series between these two teams was really competitive last year in the first round. So I think it's going to be an awesome game. But if I have to pick, I'm going to pick the team with the experience with the best player. In the Eastern Conference, I'm rolling with the Sixers over the Heat. Joel Embiid is back. He's been the best player in the league when healthy this year. And then with the other game, I originally went with Atlanta. Trae Young is back. But I'm going to switch my pick to the Chicago Bulls. I think their team is just a little bit better. And I had them taking the edge over Atlanta. Although I think this game's going to be pretty close as well. The Hawks last year, they got the upset in the first round of the play-in tournament. And they gave Boston a fairly competitive first-round matchup. But I'm going to lean with the Bulls here. And then for the 8th seed, I'm going with the 2 higher seeds. New Orleans over the Warriors, and then Miami over the Bulls. In the first round, we'll start with the Western Conference. Oklahoma City's going up against New Orleans. I've got Oklahoma City. Dallas and the Clippers, I think, is the most interesting first-round matchup. I want to see the Clippers do well. Paul George is probably my favorite player ever. But the Clippers haven't played all that well over the last month or so, while Dallas is really catching their stride. Luka Doncic is red hot. Kyrie Irving's been fantastic as well. The Mavs did a fantastic job at the trade deadline, getting guys who fit with Luka, adding some more size in the front court. PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, I think, were great pickups, and they have proven to be that with Dallas moving up to the 5 seed. I think this series could be really competitive. It certainly could go 6 or 7, but I'm going to pick the Dallas Mavericks. another disappointing exit for the Clippers, and there's going to be a lot of questions with them going into the offseason. Minnesota and Phoenix, I think, could be a lot of fun. I just think the Timberwolves roster is quite a bit better, and I'm going to have Anthony Edwards winning his first career playoff series, and then Denver and the Lakers. I don't think this is a good matchup for the Lakers. As we saw last year in the conference finals, they got swept by Denver, and I am going to pick the Nuggets here to move on. In the Eastern Conference, I hate to be chalky, but I'm picking all the higher seeds. Boston over Miami. I think Miami is obviously a team who nobody wants to see in the first round, but Boston's too good, and Miami's not going to beat the number 1 seed in round 1 for a second straight year. Between Cleveland and Orlando, the Magic are a really fun team, but they're super young, and I feel like Cleveland has a lot more pressure on them. The Magic had no expectations going into the year. They're playing with house money at this point, whereas Cleveland's kind of playing for their future. If they lose in this series, that team could be in a lot of trouble. Donovan Mitchell could want out, and things could get ugly fast. The Cavs have to win this series, and I think they will. And I think they're going to do it in 4 or 5 games. Milwaukee and Indiana, I think, is going to be a lot more competitive than people think. I could see this series going 6 or 7. There's going to be no defense in this series. And with Giannis out probably for the first couple of games, that makes things a little bit iffy. I'm still going to pick Milwaukee, though, but I'm not overly confident about it. And then the Knicks and the Sixers, I think this is going to be the best series in the Eastern Conference. Joel Embiid is healthy. Tyrese Maxey's playing really well. But I think the Knicks are playing too well right now, and I have them moving on. In the second round, Dallas over number 1 seed Oklahoma City. I feel like people are kind of sleeping on the Thunder, and I think they have the better chance than people realize. But Dallas is playing so well right now. Luka Doncic might be the best player on the planet, and I think their roster matches up with Oklahoma City with the size they've added during the trade deadline. I think this is going to be an awesome series that could go 7. But Luka and Kyrie have more playoff experience than the star players for Oklahoma City. So because of that, I'm going to have Dallas move on to the Western Conference Finals. They're going to face off against the Nuggets, who beat Minnesota. I think similarly with Oklahoma City, Minnesota's great, and I think they could go farther than people expect. And I'm not sure their playoff inexperience is going to hurt them as much as people think. But Denver, I think, is a little bit too good. I have them moving on. And then in the Eastern Conference, again, I hate to be boring and only go chalk in terms of seeding, but I've got the top 2 seeds. Boston's the best team in the league. I think they're going to manhandle Cleveland. And then between the Knicks and the Bucks, I feel like the Bucks would be the favorite here. In terms of title odds, the Knicks are like 10th or 11th in the league, despite being the 2 seed. But people forget, they were only a couple of games away from making the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and they're a significantly better team this year. Now, they obviously have the injury issues, but Jalen Brunson's been playing so well, and they have been able to produce just fine without Julius Randle and OG Anunoby for spurts during the year. So I'm going to have the Knicks go to the conference finals. And then I've got Denver over Dallas and then Boston over the Knicks, which leads to the NBA Finals of Boston and Denver. This is what people expect. I hate to be boring, but I think these are the clear 2 best teams in their respective conferences. And ultimately, I'm rolling with the Boston Celtics in 6. Jason Tatum's going to be the Finals MVP. This Celtics team is the best team in basketball, I think, pretty comfortably. I have a hard time picking against them. A lot of people are saying if the Celtics don't win this year, when are they ever going to win? Which I don't think is entirely fair. They're going to keep their core for a while, but I think this is the year they finally get over the hump. The Jason Tatum discourse has been really unfair, and I think he's going to finally get that championship, get that Finals MVP, and the Celtics are going to hang up banner number 17. I think this would be 17, yeah.
There is so much that can happen in the playoffs for any sport, but specifically basketball. A lot of stuff can go down. We watched the Heat go on an insane run last year. I'm going to start in the West with the play-in. I had the Lakers going over the Pelicans. I think the Pelicans are probably the better team, but I do think LeBron wants to get in and wants to go get that rematch against the Nuggets. I think he's going to go all in. They're going to beat the Pelicans. And then I have the Kings over the Warriors. The Warriors have one good player, and his name is Stephen Curry. He is really good, obviously, but I think the Kings are going to get their revenge after last year. And then for the 8th seed, I have the Pelicans getting over the Kings. So I will have the Pelicans go against the Thunder, and the Lakers go against the Nuggets. And in the East, I have the Sixers over the Heat. Joel Embiid is back, and I think every game he's played since he came back, he's had 30 points. and why not keep it going? He's gonna go crazy. And then I'm gonna keep the Hawks over the Bulls. The Bulls might be a little better of a team, but Trae Young's healthy, and Trae Young's a pretty good basketball player, guys. Don't know if you know this. And then I'm gonna have the Heat over the Hawks. Kind of chalky with the 7-8 in both seeds getting the last two sides, but they're blatantly obvious. I feel like the better teams, so I think that's who should get in. In the West, I am starting off big with an upset with Pelicans over the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think the Pelicans are really good, and the one thing the Thunder are really bad at, and that's rebounding. It is weird, but I think it's going to go to Game 7, maybe even Game 6. But I think the Pelicans are going to upset the Thunder, and we're going to see, because imagine Zion Williams going against the 160-pound Chet Holmgren, that skinny guy, the little skeleton dude. What's he going to do? How is he going to? He's going to get bodied by Zion every game, and they're going to get upsets. They're not going to stop Zion. That's what I think is going to happen, and I have the Pelicans getting the upset. Mavs Clippers is going to be one of the most watched first round games, I feel, because they've played 3 or 4 times in the past 5 years in the playoffs, and the Clippers have won every single time. Not anymore. I have the Mavs getting over the Clippers. Luka finally gets past them in the playoffs, and he's going to move on. I have Anthony Edwards getting his first playoff series win over the Suns. And then I have the Nuggets over the Lakers. I think the Nuggets are clearing away a lot better than the Lakers. The Lakers got swept by them in the Western Conference Finals last year. So I think the Nuggets are kind of just going to do it again. In the second round, I have the Mavs over the Pelicans. Pelicans, after getting their first upset, they're going to try out and go out and get another one against Luka and the Mavs. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Luka is on fire the past few months at this point, and I don't see it stopping in the playoffs. We saw it when he went to the finals in 2021, I think, and he was insane. And then I had the Nuggets over the T-Wolves. I think Nuggets are probably going to be the best team in the West. I think they have the most playoff experience. They just won the finals. And I have them beating the Mavs to get back to the finals. And we will see who they will go up against. In the first round, I had the Celtics over the Heat. Celtics are easily the best team in the East. And while we could see Jimmy Butler playoff moments again, I don't have it happening here. Between the Magic and the Cavs, I feel like this is a series that not a lot of people are going to watch. But this is one I really want to see. I want to see if the Cavs can kind of get past the defense that the Magic have. And I'm going to have the Magic getting the upset over the Cavs. I know they aren't as experienced as the Cavs are, but I think the youth and the defense that the Magic have are going to be able to get past the Cavaliers. Bucks Pacers, I'm going to go with the Bucks. I think even with Giannis missing probably the first few games of the series, I think the Bucks are just clearing away the better team. So I think they're going to get Giannis back and kind of steamroll the Pacers. Sixers-Knicks is a really interesting matchup. I think they could go either way. It really depends on if Joel Embiid is playing like he's averaging 35 points a game, or if he's playing like it's the playoffs and he's going to average 17. If you get the 17 a game Embiid, it's Knicks all the way, probably a sweep. But truthfully, I think this game goes to 6 or 7 games. I'm going to show my bias a little bit. I'm going to pick the Sixers because I think Embiid's going to go really crazy in this series. But the Knicks could easily go up against Sixers and win it. It all depends on which Embiid do we see, and that'll pretty much decide what the series is going to be. Celtics Magic is not going to be close. This is going to be 4-0 sweep. Celtics going back to the East Conference Finals. I don't think that game's going to be close at all. Bucks Sixers. This is a telltale of who chokes in the second round first, Doc Rivers or Joel Embiid. That's the question I'm asking myself here. And I'm going to say Joel Embiid chokes first. I'm going to go with the Bucks. I think they're probably the better team. I think Giannis is a really good basketball player. He is going to go kind of crazy. I don't think anyone in the Sixers is going to be able to stop him. And even Dame, like, truthfully, I don't know who's going to be able to stop Dame, even if he's on fire. Because if you get playoff Dame with this Bucks team, I don't even know if Doc Rivers can stop that. That's something. And then Celtics Bucks. I think the Bucks have the best chance to beat the Celtics just because if you get playoff Giannis and playoff Dame, that's kind of crazy. But I'm gonna go with the Celtics. I'm gonna be chalky, but I've been saying it's gonna be Nuggets Celtics for a while, and I'm gonna stick with my prediction. This is exactly what I've been saying is gonna happen. And the Celtics are gonna come in and say, "Hey guys, we're here. We're ready. We want to get our win." And they're going to go see Jokic, and I think they're going to get stopped. They played not too long ago, I think maybe a month ago. I know the playoffs are completely different, but we saw the Nuggets kind of steamroll the Celtics. And I think this is kind of going to be the same thing we're going to see again with the Nuggets kind of steamrolling the Bucks on those. I had the Nuggets over the Celtics in 6 games, and the question becomes, can the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown Celtics team even get a ring? They've been so good for so long. They were 20 games ahead of the second seed, but they can't win a finals. So what does that become? And Jokic and Jamal Murray are going to go out and get their second ring.
Okay, so with that, we will shift our attention to the MLB a few weeks into the season, and we'll give our current thoughts on where everybody is. So each MLB team has played roughly 15 to 18 games, give or take. It's obviously too early to make super big assumptions, but there are some interesting things that I think are worth noting. I think the biggest storylines for me is that both Central divisions have been quite good so far. We'll start with the AL Central. The White Sox might be the worst baseball team I've ever seen, but the other 4 teams all have a shot to win this division. Cleveland and Kansas City are currently at the top. I think both of these teams very well could absolutely win this division based on how they're playing. Their run differentials are first and second across all of Major League Baseball, which is probably a sign that they'll continue to produce. But I certainly would not be super comfortable with the Tigers and the Twins not too far behind. I picked the Tigers to win the division at the beginning of the year. Biased? Maybe. But as I said back then, if the Tigers' offense is average, then they should win this division. The Tigers are 9-6. They've played pretty well so far. The offense is not average. The offense is god-awful, and the team still has a pretty solid record. So this makes me think if the offense can get to an average level, then the team can win the division. The problem, though, is that the offense has not shown they can do that, and they've been one of the worst hitting groups in baseball, despite the fact that the pitching, rotation, and bullpen have been as good as expected. I put lofty expectations on the pitching staff, and they have met that. And then with Minnesota, I still think they had the most high-end talent in the division. They've started off a little bit slow this year, but they haven't necessarily been awful by any stretch. And I think this Central Division very well could be competitive into the summer months. And I'm curious to see if Cleveland and Kansas City in particular, will be able to keep this level. As for the NL Central, again, it's been really strong so far. I picked the Pirates to win this division at the beginning of the year, and so far they're proving me right. Now, over the last few years, the Pirates have historically started seasons off pretty well. So I'm not going to victory lap with them just yet, because they've done this over recent years, and then once we get into May and June, they've fallen off a little bit. Milwaukee's been playing really well this year. I think the MLB community may have just disrespected Milwaukee a little bit too much. They lost a few pieces last year, but was it really enough for them to go from a 90-win team to a 70-win team? I feel like everyone, myself included, might have overreacted, especially with young guys like Jackson Chourio now up. The Cubs, I think, are still probably the clear favorite to win this division. They've played pretty well so far this year. Shota Imanaga has been unbelievable. Seiya Suzuki's been one of the most underrated players in the league. And then Cincinnati's been pretty solid as well. Of course, we both stood very differently on how we thought the Reds would do at the beginning of the year. And so far, they've been pretty good up to this point. Other than that, there haven't been a ton of surprises other than the American League West. The Astros have been a train wreck. Nobody in that division's been all that great. The Rangers are in first place just because everybody else stinks. The Mariners' offense is completely abysmal. Julio Rodriguez has forgotten how to play baseball. And I guess I'll give myself a pat on the back because despite the fact that I picked the Mariners to make the World Series, I said that I felt like Julio Rodriguez has been a little bit overrated. And I think that has proven to be correct. I think he's going to pick it up, obviously, and he is still a great player. But I think I was kind of right that he really was not that good last year for his standards, other than that strong stretch of 3 weeks where he was Barry Bonds in August. But the other three divisions have been pretty chalky. The Yankees and the Orioles lead the AL East, although everybody's been pretty good there. The Braves and the Phillies atop the NL East, as we expected. I'll victory lap my Marlins take that they would finish in last. They have been the worst team in the NL this year, probably. Although the Rockies are not too far behind. And then in the NL West, the Dodgers have been the best team here, but it's been a pretty competitive division so far. I still think Arizona finishes second over San Diego, who's been pretty solid themselves up to this point. So overall, too early to make assumptions, but I think so far my Pirates take has aged well. My Tigers take has aged pretty well. I think so far I've been quite wrong about the Royals, though. I think that was the one team who I really was not that high on going into the year, who I have been taken aback by.
Yeah, it's the first month of baseball, so it's going to be like a lot of the standings aren't going to be the same. There's a lot of teams who always start off slow. I know the Phillies started off last year like 0-7, 0-8, and they won 90 games. So the first month in baseball never really is going to show you who is going to be winning games, who's going to be in contention for the first overall pick, all that. We saw the Mets start off 0-5, and now they've won they won 8 of their past 11, back to 500. So it's a weird thing. I think it's really interesting to see how the Yankees are doing extremely really good. And it's mainly because of just Aaron Judge and Juan Soto being really good, and the rest of the roster is just hitting really well. I had a take where I said the Yankees were going to miss the playoffs, and it's because the rest of the roster can't hit, and they're hitting, so they're proving me wrong somewhat. But who knows? Because again, it's the first month of baseball. We don't know. The AL West is kind of hilarious to look at when you see the Astros and Mariners as the bottom two teams, with the Athletics and the Angels above them, which is kind of hilarious. And the Rangers are barely above 500. This division for the first 2 weeks has been a train wreck of a division, and it's kind of funny to watch. As well as my George Kirby pick, it has not aged well. I think he has an 8 ERA right now, so that's not helping my case out right now. I said they have like 3 solid contenders. Both him and Luis Castillo are not good right now, so I did not cook on that one, which is a little unfortunate. We're seeing the Twins have one of the worst offensives in baseball right now. They're like bottom 5 for their bats right now, which is really crazy to say when you have the Guardians and the Royals in the same division be 1 and 2 essentially. Like, Guardians had Shane Bieber play like a Cy Young candidate for the first 2 starts, and then whoop, now he's Tommy John. Like who knows? And the Royals is kind of crazy when you look at guys like Seth Lugo, who is in here for a 1.06 ERA or something like that. Brady Singer's cooking. Everyone on that Royal staff has been insane, and it is kind of a shock to see them play this well. And again, it's the first week of baseball, but I'm still going to mention the Phillies and how our bats are awful. Castellanos sucks. Johan Rojas sucks. Christian Pache kind of doesn't suck. He just walked off a game the other night, so maybe he doesn't suck. But hey, who knows? It's baseball, man. My Brewers take not aged well right now. I said they're going to be awful. I still think they're not going to win the division, but we'll see. Also, Elena de la Cruz, pretty good.
Okay, so with that, we will go to our fun and game segment. We're going to be bringing back a